So this is Taylor with Temple of Geek. I am so excited to talk to you about Dust Bunny and just your work in general. I've been a
Oh,
huge
thank you.
fan of Pushing Daisies for such a long
Ah,
time. Yeah. Hannibal as well, another iconic one. My sister and a bunch of my friends love it like so much. I haven't gone around to watching the whole thing just yet, but I have started it. So let's get into Dust Bunny. How did that idea even come about? This idea that like this Dust Bunny monster under your bed, floor is lava. Go for it.
well, it started out as an amazing story. So this was going to be done as an hour-long episode for an Amazing Stories revitalization that was happening at Apple, and this story just didn't make it through the process on that show, and I just thought, okay, instead of pushing this uphill, why not just turn this into a movie? It felt like it was designed to be an Amblin style movie from the 80s to begin with, and had been vetted by Spielberg, and I got notes from Steven directly on the episode that I then applied to the feature script. So it really was about seeing something that felt like it was going to be a movie-going experience that I enjoyed growing up in the 80s. And it felt like a contained enough story that I could wrap my arms around and also be a little playful with some of the design choices and the filmmaking that gave me an opportunity to do something signature, if that
Awesome.
makes sense.
Yeah, no, speaking of the 80s, what did you draw inspiration from in those stories? Because I mean I have my like things that came to mind as I was watching this movie from movies that I or books that I had read when I was younger. But what was the inspiration for you? What were the different stories that you pulled from?
Well, I love films like Goonies and Gremlins and E.T. and Poltergeist that often featured young protagonists up against odds that they are uh, not trained to handle and yet somehow becoming their own heroes. I love gateway horror. I love movies that are intended for family audiences or bigger audiences that are also have a little spice to them and can be scary. I think, I just saw Predator Badlands. And I was like, this is great. It's a family predator movie, it's a family monster movie of sorts.
Mhm.
And, I think what's interesting in the genre is that we have so many avatars when we don't have child protagonist characters that then become the entry point for young people. When I was growing up, those were often robots, whether it was R2D2 and C3PO or Vincent and Old Bob from the Black Hole. Uh, Characters that weren't adults, weren't children, but were something else that allowed us to project our experience onto them and immerse ourselves in the narrative in a way that we don't often get to do when we don't see people just like us.
That's awesome. And I love that like the focus of the story is around a child and she brings this like childhood innocence, this intelligence, this imagination, and you're kind of left wondering for a little while, is she just imagining this? Are we just looking through her eyes, or is this actually real? And obviously the adults around her. So could you
Well,
talk about, oh, go ahead.
yeah, sorry.
No, no, go for it.
That's part of the fun of the childhood experience, I think, is what's real, what's our imagination, being able to build a vocabulary with adults so they can have an honest discourse with us being, the kids in the picture, and always sort of like seeing myself as through a child lens. I think that's part of just being a queer person as well, is that you're looking for characters who aren't like fitting a standardized perception of who people should be, and oftentimes there's just a broader canvas in a child character for you to project who you were at that time and relate to them in that way. And there's something, I think if the movie has a very basic message, it's believe children and or listen to children in a way that we were very much setting out to make a movie for children of all ages that that parents who like John Wick films or shoot 'em ups would see this and say like, okay, there's enough stuff for me, but there's also a lot of stuff for my kid. And it being like, I would love if Dust Bunny becomes a lot of kids' first R-rated movie because we did plan on making a children's movie and perhaps too spicy for the MPAA, but we don't have any nudity, we don't have any foul language. There's suggestions of blood, but there's no real arterial spray. So it is, and the violence is very sort of Looney Tunes cartoon violence. So in my mind, we were making a children's movie, but the MPAA had other thoughts. So there's something about having kids central to a story that I still enjoy as an adult. Like a lot of people think like, oh, it has a child protagonist in it, therefore it is for children only. But I look at films like, Pan's Labyrinth or The Devil's Backbone, like two of Guillermo del Toro's masterworks, that are all about kids being forced into circumstances that coerce them into growing up before they're ready and how they rise to the occasion and become their own heroes. I love those stories and they never stop speaking to me no matter how old I get. So I wanted to make something that was going to speak to kids and also speak to the kid in the adults who were seeing the movie. And when we got the R rating, I was like, okay, like we'll just have to, you know, deal the cards that we have been dealt or play the cards that we have been dealt and hope that we find an audience that recognizes that this is a movie for everybody.
And it definitely did speak to like the child in me as well. And like I said,
Good.
like it reminded me like of a lot of stories that I watched as a kid. Probably some of them I maybe watched a little bit too young, but also I feel like with the ratings, it can be a little bit subjective and it changes over time. Like a movie like this, I think when I was a kid would have been completely fine to watch. I mean, I was watching like Alien and stuff like
Same.
when I was
Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
I saw Alien when I was 9.
Yeah, I think I was around there around that time as well. And even like with like Star Wars and stuff, there's like some scenes, like you were saying, like there isn't like outright blood splatter, but there's like some violence in there that's sort of like fantastical. And that's actually one of the things I really love about your work is you merge all of these different like genres together and then you add this fantastical whimsical element as well that's sort of like yes there's the horror, yes there's the macabre, there's the, like the action, but then it all kind of like wraps up into like this fantastical element that just like transports you into this other world even though it doesn't look too different from our own world. But could you talk about like the stylistic choices that you chose for the movie and also maybe like bringing some of like Pushing Daisies and Hannibal stuff into it, and how
Well,
you
I
wanted to
think
differentiate it? Sorry.
there's something about like it does feel tonally like a hybrid of Pushing Daisies and Hannibal in some ways, probably more Pushing Daisies than Hannibal. There's something about I talked with Nicole Whitaker, our cinematographer, a lot about those two tones, and how if Pushing Daisies was sweet and Hannibal was savory, that Dust Bunny needed to be mango chicken. So it needed to be sweet and savory and have a flavor that gave you permission to have joy in the dish, but also had some nutritional value and some substance to it as well. And there's something about making movies for yourself as the first member of the audience that is it may not always serve a filmmaker, but in terms of, I can't imagine working on something that I wouldn't watch
Mhm.
or enjoy watching. And that's my kind of barometer of what the audience expectation is or what an audience might get out of the experience. Because if I'm enjoying it, I'm hoping that the like-minded audience members will also enjoy it. And it's a fairy tale first and foremost. And that gives a certain sense of danger and expectation of thrills. And I do love fairy tale storytelling. The structure is very fairy tale-esque. The resolution is fairy tale-esque. And there was something about making a fairy tale in a modern box office, dynamic that uh, I didn't think was going to be as tricky as it is, but because fairy tales in, their origin are very dark. And I feel like this movie doesn't go as dark as some of those fairy tales originally did. But I'm hoping that it's fun first and it's a romp first. So whether you're an adult or a child, that you're going to have an entertaining experience. And then if you get something a little bit more out of it, if you see yourself in Aurora in a way that helps you come to a point of acknowledging the perspective of children in these stories and real fears that children have that are shared with adults, that you might have a different experience.
Yeah. No, I definitely had a fun time watching this
Oh,
movie
good.
and
Good.
kind of like I did not expect. I mean, I also didn't really read much about it. I love going into things blind, but the all the different like turns that it took us, even though it was still like very like contained as a story, but like you bring in like the FBI, Sigourney Weaver's character, the ending.
Right.
Can you talk about, I want to talk about like the actual performances and the characters because they
Yes.
were just wonderful, like
Oh,
all
good.
across the board. And I read online that you chose, well, you wrote the part for Mads Mikkelsen specifically. Could you
Yes.
talk about those different characters that you created and then how you went about casting them and bringing all of those together?
Well, one of the things that I love about Maz and his, legacy of genre performances, especially in kind of worldwide releases where, he's a Marvel villain or an Indiana Jones villain or a Star Wars villain cum hero, those types of films with these, a James Bond villain, those types of films only see a small slice of Maz, and knowing him and working with him and seeing how infectious his personality is, how joyful he is, what a family guy he is, and how in love with his granddaughter he is, that I was really excited about showing the audience a little bit more of who Maz is as a person, because we get him in these wonderful villain roles, or we get him in these fantastic fool characters from his Danish comedies that he usually does with Thomas Jensen Anders, or Anders Jensen, like The Green Butcher or Men and Chicken, or recently The Last Viking, that are, you opposite ends of a spectrum, between the villains and the fools, and somewhere in between is his character in Dust Bunny. And I just kind of wanted to like share with the audience a glimpse, a little bit greater glimpse of who he is as a human being by having some of those lighter moments with Sigourney, or the very human frustrations he has trying to navigate what's real about this story that this little girl is spinning. So that was one of the things I was very excited about working with Maz. Working with Sigourney, I have been, a fan of hers. Alien was what introduced me to her, but then I quickly discovered all of her collaborations with Christopher Durang in these wonderful absurdist plays, and her sense of comedy being so specific and unindulgent, but crafting characters that are absurd and fools in their own right, but also maintain a sense of decorum that is singularly Sigourney Weaver, that had me very excited about working with her. And Working Girl is one of her most well-known comedic performances, but you see her in Ghostbusters, navigating the comedy and being relatively the straight man, quote unquote, for these more comedic actors, and being able to hold her own with a different kind of comedy that is much more stage trained and lived in than a broader comedic performance. So I was really excited about doing a comedy performance with Sigourney. And Sophie, our wonderful casting director, Margie Simpkins, found her, auditioned, put the listing out, got thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of submissions, narrowed those thousands and thousands and thousands of submissions into 1,000 auditions, and then narrowed those 1,000 auditions down to 12 actors that they showed me. And Sophie stood out immediately. And She had this very thick Scottish brogue. And we were like, "You're great. But between you and Maz, nobody's going to understand what anyone is saying in this movie." And Maz loved her so much, he was like, "Let's just make her a little Scottish girl, and we'll just let her have the tools and facility to for the best performance by not having her to like jump through an extra hoop of talking in an accent that wasn't her native." Uh, and where I was like, "Well, I don't know if we can do that because it's supposed to be set in New York and it's supposed to be, a US movie, and that will change distribution and all sorts of things." But it didn't matter because Sophie went off and taught herself a flat American accent in 2 weeks by watching TikTok videos, and then came back and auditioned, and we just like were like, "Here, it's yours."
Wow, that's incredible. That is incredible. Because actually, one of my favorite like bits throughout the film was Mads not being able to say Aurora,
Right.
properly, and her continuously, um, correcting him.
Yeah.
I had
And
no idea. Yeah.
that came out when Maz read the script, and he was like, "I love the script. I'm so honored that you thought of me. We have to change your name. I'll never be able to pronounce it." And I was like, "No, no, we'll make it a bit. It'll be funny. It'll be cute. Like we'll just do the thing."
It was a great bit. I did want to talk about like the design of the monster and like the
Yes.
CGI around it and the way that it like moved through the floorboards. Just tell us about that because it was like I mean, Dust Bunny, we know it's gonna look like a rabbit. We know it's gonna be like a monster rabbit thing, but then you like hide it for so long and then as you're showing us little glimpses and it was just done so, so well.
Oh, good. It started with I'd worked with this wonderful comic artist named John Wayshak, JonWayshak. And if you look at his art and you look at how he draws characters, there is an insanity that is implicit in his style that I find really captivating. And the characters seem mad. Like there's some craziness in their eyes or the exaggeration of certain features. And he had worked on a Pushing Daisies comic that went belly up when Wildstorm collapsed. And so I reached out to him and I was like, "Hey, do you want to design a monster?" And he was like, "Of course. What does it look like?" And I said, "Well, it's part Highland cow, part piranha, part hippopotamus, and all bunny." And he sent me a bunch of sketches, and initially, the bunny had horns, and I was like, "He looks too much like Ludo from Labyrinth," which I also love and is sort of a big influence. The Jim Henson and Brian Henson um, filmography are very influential on this movie. So uh, he did the sketches. We handed them over to the wonderful people at Legacy who built a life-size puppet. of the rabbit. So there are some shots with the puppet, some shots with the CG. If you're seeing full body, it's CG. If you're seeing head and arms, it's the puppet.
Wow.
And so it was really about coming up with a monster that could both be scary and adorable. And uh, we went back and forth. Should we build a puppet? Should we not build a puppet? It's expensive. And we're, a smaller budgeted movie, not a micro budget, but we were under 20. And it just felt that it would help Sophie's performance.
Mhm.
Not that she needed the help, but it would help kind of contextualize what she was looking at, what she's reacting to, what she's supposed to be seeing when there's nothing there. And one of my favorite days on set is when we introduced her, when the puppet arrived and we opened up the crate and then we like called her in and she got to react to him and she was like, he's so cute. And that was super fun to see and fun to see her reaction and this, this creature come to life. Like it's those first steps. And I love monsters. I love monsters of all varieties. I love the classic Universal monsters. I love the Alien. I love Predator. There's nary a monster I have met that I didn't absolutely love and wasn't attracted to as an audience member. So I was really excited about making a monster movie that was also a family movie despite its R rating. And so there was so much about the creature and the creature design that had to serve uh, multiple masters in a way that it had to be adorable and accessible, but also deadly and terrifying and funny.
Mm. No, I'm similar to you. I love like when there's like new creatures or monsters or something on screen. Like you mentioned R2 and C3PO earlier, but even like a lot of like monsters and creatures that you see like throughout, Star Wars and other sort of sci-fi fantasy media and trying to like understand them because a lot of times like they are beings of them like in and of themselves, even though this one here is kind of like wished upon, she brings it to life through a wish, but it's still like a being and you can tell throughout the movie. I mean, not to like spoil the ending, but I picked up early on that it was like both sort of going after her, but also like protecting her, like right from
Yes.
from the early, start early on in the story, and she doesn't realize that. And it was interesting, kind of seeing kind of what the monster was going to do next, and then having her realize, oh wait, it is kind of part of me. It is, protecting me, but also it's not something that I can just completely get rid of. Something I have to live with. I love that.
Well, and you just hit on one of the like the central notes from Steven Spielberg on the story was that relationship and that personalization that Aurora has with the monster. That's all very Spielbergian and were his exact notes when he read the first version of the story and was like, whatever we're doing with this monster, it has to be reflective of Aurora and her worldview, and it has to be her monster very specifically. And That was it's a simple note, but it was one of those guardrail notes that just directs the flow of the narrative the moment you hear it and you're like of course and then you're hearing it from Steven Spielberg so of course it's going to be something that has to be integral to it so it when I stop and sort of think like there's so much of the Amblin moon dust in the story because of its origins and how he developed and being able to set in Steven Spielberg's conference room next to the sled from Citizen Kane and hear his thoughts on a children's story that is designed to honor the legacy of the 80s Amblin brand that was very surreal. Like when I stop and sort of think about like I collaborated on this story with Steven Spielberg and then I got to make this movie. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's definitely very, very cool. Thank you for your time. This has been
Thank
wonderful. I can
you.
go on and on. There's like so much I would
Well,
love to talk about,
if
but
there's anything like when you're doing the article and you're like, oh shit, I should have asked this, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to get back on the phone with you.
oh, I appreciate it. That's awesome. And I have to say this because my friends told me I have to. When is Hannibal coming back? And for me personally, I still haven't given up hope on Pushing Daisies. I know it's a far-fetched dream, but
No, I
you
think
you have to have
the
it.
rights for Hannibal are a little complicated now because Thomas Harris is trying to get them all back and get them underneath, one umbrella.
Hmm.
Uh, like a Pushing Daisy season 3 right now seems like it would happen faster than a Hannibal, and we've been talking to Warner Brothers about the entire cast wants to come back. I wrote the Bible for season 3 and gave it to them. And hopefully, that comes to pass. We're at such a funny place in the industry that before the strikes, Warner Brothers was like, yes, definitely, let's get this going. And then after the strikes, they're like, we don't know what anybody wants anymore because everybody is in such disarray.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that Pushing Daisies, the plan that's already like drawn up, gets to come to fruition in some way. I would love to get back into bed with Lee Pace and Anna Friel and Shy McBride and Kristen Chenoweth and so many of the wonderful guest stars like Molly Shannon. I talked to Paul Reubens at length about his return as Oscar Vibinius, and right before he died, he had called me and said, "Hey, what's happening with that Pushing Daisies revival?" I was like, "Well, we're still trying to figure it out. It's the strikes and everything." He's like, "Is it happening anytime soon?" And I was like, Not really." And I didn't realize it, but he knew that he wasn't going to be around for much longer. And it's uh, one of the regrets about not doing it sooner.
Yeah. Well, either way, I hope it does happen at some
Me
point.
too. Me too.
Yeah, I'm like gonna be like first one in line to watch this.
Yay.
Like
Thank you.
huge, huge fan. So many people are. It's such a beautiful show. This is such a beautiful movie. I can't wait for audiences to see it. The theater that
Thank
I
you.
was in during TIFF when I did watch it was having a grand time with it. We were enjoying it a lot.
Did you
So
do Midnight Madness?
I did not. I wish I
Okay.
could, but I had a bit of a commute, so I couldn't do any of the
Right.
midnight ones. But I did
Yeah.
watch it on another day for another screening. But it was fantastic movie. Had a
Okay.
great time with it. And yeah, congratulations. And I
Thank
can't wait
you.
to see more. I can't wait for Pushing Daisies. You've given me a lot of hope for this now.
Yes. Good, good, good. Well, very nice to meet you. And like I
Very
said,
nice
don't
to meet
hesitate
you
to reach
too.
out.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Brian.